Good morning, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Baghurst, and I'm joined this morning by TJ Buchanan, who's part of World Lacrosse. TJ, rather than me try to explain about your history and what you do, I'm going to turn that over to you. And if you wouldn't mind, just give us a little bit of your history and how you got to World Lacrosse, and then what you're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, Tim, thanks for having me on. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of what we're doing in the sport development space because, while I might be a lacrosse guy, the concepts of great coaching and athlete development transcend virtually all sports. And when you do what's right for athletes, you get great results regardless of the sport that they're playing. So thank you for that opportunity. So I am the Director of Sport Development for World Lacrosse, which is a pretty broad title. It really encompasses the development of coaches, the development of athletes. I work pretty closely with our technical director and technical committees on officials development programming, and as well as the acquisition and support of our member countries. And that can be anything from helping to get a new country started, bringing one on board, which we just did with Panama about 2 months ago. I'm currently working with the Dominican Republic. Hopefully they're going to be voted on here in the next couple of weeks. And that can be, governance issues, that can be strategic planning, helping them to grow and develop the sport in their countries.
Well, a lot of people may just assume, hey, I want to go into sports and, I want to be a coach. And, that's the normal transition, right? But here's an example of somebody like yourself who has a full-time job, has a career in sports administration, and you're not a coach, you're not an athletic director, you're not one of those traditional roles. So how did you get there? It's an interesting role, and I'm curious, how did that happen?
So really interesting story. And it's a little bit long, so I'll try to keep it brief. But I actually did not play formal organized lacrosse until I got to university, to college. And played club lacrosse. I'd thrown around with some friends in the neighborhood leading up to that, but never played in a game until college university level. And I went to school to be an educator, to be a teacher. And I graduated from university and went into teaching and decided, the school where I'm at, they don't have a lacrosse program. And some of my best friends in life, came through that experience in college that I still keep in touch with to this day. So started a lacrosse program and started coaching. And through a series of strange events, one of my college teammates, his brother was the director of coaching education for U.S. Lacrosse at the time. And so we would play each other. My college teammate was coaching with his brother at their school. And, so we played each other for fun. And at some point he goes, you're doing a pretty good job with this coaching thing. I work at U.S. Lacrosse. We have a coach development program. Would you like to come on board as one of our national coach development trainers? So I got involved really early on in the coach development space, going around the United States, doing clinics for coaches, teaching them the basics of, how to be a great coach, but also, a little bit of the lacrosse piece as well. But more importantly, how to work with your athletes. Did that for a few years, and through our friendship continued to grow. And at some point he called me up and said, "Hey, I'm leaving U.S. Lacrosse. I know you're not entirely happy being in public education. And, I can't get you the job, but I can get you an interview if it's something you would like to do." And so I said, "Hey, you know what? You're right. I'm not entirely happy in public education. Sport is my passion in life. And let's give this thing a shot." So long story short, I interviewed and I obviously ended up landing the role at U.S. Lacrosse as the manager of coach development. So I was responsible there for developing all of the tools and the resources that are provided through their relatively robust coach development program. Fast forward a few years into that role, and we were attending some conferences at the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and USA Hockey was talking about their ADM model, which is kind of the godfather of the athlete development movement in the United States. And so I was talking with my director and I said, this is something we need to do. It just makes too much sense to not really look at what is the right thing for the right time at the right time for athletes, and start to build this out and align our coach development program with it. And as anybody who's really in this space will tell you, athlete development in and of itself is a full-time role. So kind of got to the point where said to my director, hey, we need to make a decision. Like, I got to either be full-time in the coach stuff or full-time in the athlete, but I can't continue to do both. She agreed, and I became the technical director for athlete development at US Lacrosse, and was charged with, doing my homework and building out their LADM, the lacrosse athlete development model of, what is the right lacrosse experience at the right time in a lacrosse athlete's development. Led that for 4 or 5 years, and super happy doing it. Making amazing progress, doing some great things, and professionally, you're always looking for that next step, right, to make an impact. And the position at World Lacrosse opened up, and I said, I love what I'm doing, but I've got nothing to lose, right? Why not try to take this thing international and work on a global scale with it? Submitted my resume and application, and as of May 1st, I have been with World Lacrosse now for a year, and really, really diving into the athlete development stuff and starting to share that message out with our current 66 member countries, as well as building out a fairly robust coach development program that incorporates all those athlete development principles. And here I am now talking with you, Tim, and sharing it with Florida State University and anybody else who's watching today.
Well, I want to get to kind of your experiences in the differences between a national organization versus a world organization, because there's definitely some nuances that change in that environment. But first, let's talk about this athlete development model. There's a push for getting away from sports specialization, but there's a push from coach educators, developers like myself, people who are developing the models like yourself. But at the same instance, if we go to the micro level, we'll see a lot of coaches who discourage it. We'll see a lot of parents who think that that's playing a variety of sports is a really bad idea for my daughter Janie, because look over there at Claire's doing it 7 times a week, and if I don't do it, she's not gonna make it. She's not gonna get that scholarship. She's not gonna be as successful. So while we continue to proclaim, hey, this sports specialization thing isn't really a great idea, especially when you're in your youth, how do we get that across to the parents and the coaches in high schools and the club coaches, especially, who a lot of their salaries are based on whether Janie is playing or training 6 days a week, because that's where they get their income?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I have a little bit of I'll say a snarky response to that. And this is the message that I tend to use, and I can't take credit for it, but I don't remember where I stole it from, so I also can't cite who I got it from, right? But my kid I have a 10-year-old daughter. She loves carnival food. If it's deep fried and covered in powdered sugar, she is going to eat it all day long, and as much as I can put in her face, she's going to keep eating, right? But at some point, I have to listen to the experts, right? I have to listen to the pediatrician, and I've got to feed my kid some Brussels sprouts or broccoli, because it's good for her. It's better for her. It's going to make her, more holistically developed and healthy person. Mm-hmm. So if my pediatrician tells me carnival food is bad all the time, give your kid the Brussels sprouts, why wouldn't I listen to people who are experts in sport, who are saying, look, if your kid does this same thing over and over and over, there's going to be repetitive use injury, right? I mean, it's a fact, right? Mm-hmm. You have 12-year-olds getting Tommy John surgery in baseball, right? It's medically fact, right? And the burnout thing is real. You look at the work that's out there in terms of athlete satisfaction and why kids are dropping out of sport. It's too much, right? They need that diversification of experience for not only their physical well-being, but for their psyche. And the other thing I think we always need to look at is, what are the benefits of multi-sport or multi-activity, right? We learn, new movement motor patterns, right? If I'm playing different sports, which will help me solve the movement problems of the given sport that I'm in. It doesn't mean I have to, play everything equally. I can still have a preference, right? Mm-hmm. My kid still has a preference towards carnival food, but I'm still going to give her a little bit of vegetables every now and again to make sure that she stays on track. And so I think, again, if we listen to the experts in terms of what's best for our kids' psyche, what's best for them physically to help them grow and mature and develop and be healthy, why wouldn't we listen to the experts in sport who are doing this work and showing us the right way forward?
It's funny. Your story is funny because I've used the same analogy with my son and ice cream, and I've done exactly the same conversation with parents and coaches, but with ice cream. So my question then is, if I can kind of push a little further, you're in your analogy, you're taking your daughter to the doctor, and your doctor's saying, hey, you need to eat some broccoli and vegetables and things like that. Unfortunately, a lot of parents and coaches don't go to the quote unquote doctor who's the expert in some of these athlete development models to say, hey, have you thought about this? You need to diversify a little bit. How then do you, in your role, get that knowledge across to those people that actually need to hear it? Is it through social media? Is it through regular conversations? Do you offer workshops? How do you make sure that people learn this and so that they actually take it on board?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, we absolutely have what I would say a marketing problem, right? Because I'm going to listen to my kid's coach. And if my kid's coach tells me that my athlete is falling behind, whatever that means, because they're not there 7 days a week, well, they're the expert. That's my kid's coach. I'm paying them. Right. Well, okay, that's fair. Right. But we also have to look at it and go, well, what is this person's vested interest in my kid being there 7 days a week? Is it, and I don't think we necessarily always think critically enough about that. Right. We want our kids to succeed. Right. We're parents. We want our kids to be the best. We want them to have a great experience. And when we rely on that, but we don't necessarily think critically enough. I think the other thing that, that parents maybe could do more often is look to the national governing bodies, right? They have full-time professional staff who we have a vested interest in your kid participating in sport, but not necessarily in your dollars coming into us as a national governing body or an international federation, right?
Well, I think if I can interrupt you, the challenge there is making parents aware there is a national governing body, there is a world organization.
That's
a lot of them have no idea. Say again?
That's a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, and so you raised a couple of really good points. So what do you do about it? And when I was with US Lacrosse, we really thought long and hard about, and I use this term with trepidation, of parent education, right? Because that's a very fine line to walk. You're going to tell me how to raise my kid? No. Right. So maybe parent information is a better term than parent education. But we really worked hard to put together tools and resources and specifically targeted towards the parents of lacrosse athletes. Explainer videos, 35, 45 second long, explainer videos about the core values of why multi-sport participation is important, fun, engaging, and we put them on social media platforms. We made them free. We did in collaboration with there's probably 15 or so other national governing bodies and the USOPC, we put together a 5 ways series of documents. And it was 5 ways to tell if your kid is enjoying sport, 5 ways to prevent burnout, 5 ways to help with, and they were 1-page infographic-y type of documents. And again, push them out loud and proud. Hey, this is what's best for kids, right? And when you see that collaboration between all the NGBs, it's not that lacrosse is pushing it or tennis or hockey or archery or whatever the sport is. It's all of these national governing bodies are in agreement. Like when you have 15 national governing bodies saying, don't play just my sport, you have to listen to that message, right? Because we're the sport. We love it. It's our passion. It's our livelihood in some cases, but we're telling you, no, go somewhere else, play another sport. And I think that's one of the other things I want to touch on is the idea of multi-sport doesn't necessarily have to be that organized. I'm on a team, I go to practice, I travel on the weekends to play. It's more multi-activity, right? Does your kid go out and skateboard? Do they play hoops in the driveway? Do you go hiking on the weekends? Take a kayak out on the lake, right? Those are all things that will help prevent the overuse injury, the burnout, all those things that we talk about that are negatives of sports specialization.
That's a good point. I want to pull up you've been working on an athlete development model, and I just want to put it up here, and maybe you can explain it a little bit. There's kind of 5 dimensions here, and just explain what these are.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, I've been with World Lacrosse for just over a year. May 1st was my anniversary date. And literally one of the first projects I launched there was building out an athlete development model so that we can start to educate, all of the national governing bodies globally on, what is the right experience at the right time for athletes. And that's a whole nother story when we start talking international, but we'll focus on the core values for right now. So really thought about, okay, what makes sense to base this philosophy on? So there's five items here. The first is the idea of play and stay. So getting the athletes active, involved, and engaged, right? So, they're not standing in lines. They're not, sitting on the bench during practice while, 10 players are out on the field doing something. You're designing a practice structure and maybe even a competition structure that gets people involved in the action. And when they do that, when they're involved and engaged, they stay, right? So we want you to think about getting your athletes playing and staying. The second one, as I work around kind of in a clockwise motion there, is the idea of get moving. And that's really the concept of physical literacy, right? Teaching athletes how to use and move their bodies to solve the problems of the game, which also, as we know, leads to, a healthier long-term lifestyle. I stayed away from physical literacy because internationally, we have athletes who come in very late. In some of the Asian countries that we work with, they may not start playing lacrosse until university. So if we say physical literacy, it's, oh my gosh, well, they're too old to gain all of those necessary motor skills. No, we just, or they may actually already have them. Now we just have to adapt them to the demands of lacrosse. So I use the term get moving, right? It's a little marketing play. Mm-hmm. The third one there is the idea of players first. So the decisions that we make as administrators, as coaches, and even to an extent as official are about what's in the best interest of the player or the players in the case of a team sport, right? So really thinking critically of, is this going to, put my athlete at the center of everything I do? Because as we know in sport, when you start with the athlete in mind and what's best for them, the other stuff kind of just falls into place when you do what's right for the athlete. The fourth one there is the idea of seriously fun, which means we want to create an environment it's fun. And we know fun means different things to different ages, stages, and developmental levels of the athlete. So seriously fun means we're going to take it serious. It's not just going to be, playground games and, we may or may not learn some lacrosse skill, but we're going to deliver our lacrosse instruction in a way that is fun and meaningful to the age of the athletes or the stage of development of the athletes we're working with. And then the last piece there is coach the coaches, right? There's that old adage in that you coach the way that you were coached. And that might have been good. It might have been bad. It might have been somewhere in between. None of it is necessarily right or wrong. But with all that we know now about athlete development, coach development, and how to be most impactful, we have to share that information to fully develop our athletes. We have to share that with the coaches. So coaching the coaches, and and especially in the international space, many of our member countries, like I said, there's 66 of them. They do a pretty good job of getting some North Americans to come to their country and do some coaching. That may be in the form of a 3 or a 4 day clinic. They might have a national team coach that's a North American that's working with the highest levels of their athletes. But what are they doing for the sub-national team level athletes, right? What kind of education are those coaches getting? Because it might be a national team player who's now coaching, let's say, a 14 or a 15-year-old athlete, but their experience, is different. They don't have that robust background in the sport, right? They may have not started playing until they were 19 or 20 years old, and now they have a North American national team coach coaching them. So they've missed out on all of this other youth side of things. So, providing some programs and services, resources to help those coaches, really learn what it means to be a lacrosse coach and how to implement, the athlete development model and all of the different factors that fall within it.
I think there's also a challenge in a world level, especially of, ensuring that in smaller organizations, the people who are becoming coaches are often the people who are athletes and successful athletes in their country who may have never experienced what it's like to have good coaching. And
Absolutely.
so then, well, I'm the best player, I'm becoming the head coach, or I'm developing these programs, away I go. And I've never really thought about how to be a good coach. It's just, this is what I've always done. Why can't you do it like me? So one of the questions I had in looking at your values is how do you coach the coach? What programs do you offer to make sure that the coaches are getting that education and development? And then are you doing anything to evaluate that programming to make sure that they're actually learning, getting it, so to speak?
Yeah. So as the International Federation, we made a decision of, are we going to get into the certification business of certifying coaches globally, or are we going to become more of a repository clearinghouse of information to provide to the national governing bodies so that they can then take that and distribute and use it? And we went with the second model. We're a relatively small federation right now. In terms of staff, I am the sport development staff. We have some tremendous volunteers who do a great job of helping us out. But where we are right now is very much, let's become that clearinghouse and repository of information, and provide that to the national governing bodies. So we're currently working on building a multi-level coach development program. Just in January of 2020, we launched what we're calling the bronze level curriculum. We're kind of playing off the medals theme. So we have a bronze, the silver level is in development now. We'll be working on a gold in 2021. And obviously it's kind of the level 1, 2, 3 concept, right? Bronze is your catch-all, the basics, what you need to know to get on the field, help the athletes have a good time, and it progresses from there. And so then what we're doing with that is we've distributed the information for the bronze clinic, if you will, or bronze curriculum, to all of our member national governing bodies. It's yours, take it, make it your own. We left space on the PowerPoint slides for them to brand it, to co-brand it. We want you to have it and use it and take it. Alongside of that, in January, we also launched the World Lacrosse Coach Developer Academy. And so what we're doing is bringing individuals in from the national governing bodies, at the recommendation of their leadership, people who maybe have done some other coach development in the past, who have a background in coaching, education, things like that. We bring them in for a 4-day training session. And we spend time, obviously going through the clinic curriculum itself, but then also really diving into how do you teach adult learners, right? Because that's something that, most of us don't have experience with. You're a professor at a university, you get it, right? But the guy who, works for, an international shipping company in Belgium, right? He doesn't teach adult learners, right? He's, filling orders or managing logistics, but hey, he's been tabbed to be the guy to train coaches in Belgium. So we bring them in and we really teach them about how to teach adults and how to use that curriculum then to develop their coaches. And we try to always stress that we're not here to teach you lacrosse. We're here to teach you to teach coaches to teach lacrosse. Right. And at first, when they, the first day or so, they're very, very heavily invested in, well, what about catching and throwing? And they're like, wait, back up. Let's back up. You need to teach the coaches how to teach their athletes. You don't need to teach the coach how to catch and throw. You need to teach them how to teach the athletes to catch and throw. Right. So, we spend 4 days, we bring them in, spend a lot of time doing that. And they have, I'll say practice time where they have to teach lessons back to the group. They get critiqued and evaluated by the group, and then, have an opportunity to teach again during that process to see if they've, accepted the feedback that they were giving and implemented that into their future lessons. And then, we send them back home armed with that knowledge and armed with those new abilities to really start taking ownership of coach development within their country. I really believe that's the only way it can be successful for us is the pyramid scheme, right? We're at the tip of the pyramid, and we're going to find as many Pied Pipers as we can, and we're going to give them all of the information that we have. And we're going to, at our expense, we're going to train them. We're going to do everything we can do to support them, and then we're going to send them home. and then still be in the background playing a supporting role. So when that guy in Belgium sends me an email or WhatsApp messages me and says, hey, I did a clinic and this failed miserably. Cool, let's talk about it, right? We'll mentor you now and help you to get through this. And it also is nice because we're starting to see a little bit of some professional networking now between the countries. So, I just approved a grant request from Luxembourg. They want to work with somebody from Norway who both were trained at the Coach Developer Academy, and they want to work together to do some stuff within the European Lacrosse Federation, which is one of our continental federations. And, the ELF, they're on board with the idea. So now we have these people from two different countries coming together, right? And it's going viral almost, right? That, they're going to meet in the middle and train up other coaches. So far, all signs are pointing to the positive.
I've worked in an international sport as a volunteer for many years and have seen kind of the challenges associated with being international versus national. And I'm curious, you have 66 countries or federations, I think you mentioned. Language is one of those big challenges, right? I'm curious, how do you cross that divide? I'm sure, English is the international language of World Lacrosse, I'm guessing, but I'm right by the nod of the head. How do you then communicate with, organizations where, language is difficult? Somebody from Belgium may have learned English growing up in school, but you may have another person from another country where English is a challenge. And here you are trying to offer a 4-day workshop where colloquialisms, get thrown in. The Pied Piper, for example, is one you used in this. How do you kind of cross that divide, and what are some of the challenges you've seen in U.S. lacrosse versus World Lacrosse where you are now?
So it's interesting you bring that up. That's actually another one of the reasons why we went with the, let's bring people in and train them, because I don't necessarily understand the cultural implications of coaching or the way that we coach. I definitely don't understand and cannot communicate in 66 different languages. I'm rudimentary Spanish and, barely English, as you can probably tell from our interview here. So that was one of the ways that we cross that divide, is empower the local people. The other thing is, a lot of times, things that we take for granted, like the Pied Piper thing, you don't know that you've lost somebody until you get that blank stare back at them. And, a little funny story. I spent 21 days in Africa back in January. We visited 4 different countries, doing some coach development clinics, doing some athlete clinics. And one of the games that we play early on to teach the idea of progression in our skills and drills is a game of rock, paper, scissors. So I'm in Kenya, and hey, we're going to play rock, paper, scissors. And, everybody was being very respectful. And so I get up with the partner, and it was another North American, and she and we start going to demonstrate it. And okay, now you practice. And everybody just looked at us. And I quickly realized rock, paper, scissors is not a universal game. So, it turned into, okay, well, we're going to have to teach them how to play rock, paper, scissors, which actually became a really good exercise, right? And it was not planned, but it became a really good exercise in how do you teach an athlete something they have never seen or done before. And, so luckily we were able to pivot and kind of go with that. And then after I was talking to a couple of the coaches that were there, and they actually really appreciated that, we took the time to now teach them something that we took for granted, that they would know how to do, but they were able to relate that concept. Another kind of cool experience we had was at our first Coach Developer Academy, we had 4 individuals from Taiwan/Chinese Taipei. And we actually had them teach us a lesson in Mandarin. I don't speak a lick of Mandarin. I had no idea. So it was really eye-opening to us of, languages certainly can be a barrier, but if you're very intentional with your instruction and you're doing a good job with the demonstration and, in an appropriate way, you're hands-on with your athletes, if they're not doing what you want, you can still communicate that through, which is also good practice even if you speak the same language of, being intentional in your demonstrations, being appropriately hands-on when need be. They were teaching us a catching and throwing lesson. And so at one point, the one coach developer from Chinese Taipei came over, and he literally took my hand and he put it up here. Mm-hmm. And he said whatever the word was in Mandarin, that this is where I want you to have your hand. Mm-hmm. And when I would drop it down, he would go, he would shake his head, because everybody understands yes and no, right? So he would shake his head and go, okay, I get it, right? So we broke down those communication barriers with very deliberate instruction and demonstration, and again, that appropriate hands-on piece to put the athlete in a position to succeed.
Yeah, very interesting ideas, and I like the concept of kind of thinking outside of the box. There's a colloquialism for you, but just expanding beyond just this is how we've always done it. This is how we're doing it, but how do we make it different? And tying shoelaces is an example I've used in classes where I ask students to either tie their shoelaces the opposite direction and loop it the opposite way, and all of a sudden it's I don't know how to tie my shoelaces, or actually provide verbal instructions on how to tie a shoelace and have the person follow those instructions, and all of a sudden tying shoelaces becomes a very difficult task. Looking at coach development then, in the future, we see increased internet use. We're talking live online, which we may not have been able to do 15 years ago. How do you leverage the internet, social media, and all these things to improve this coach development now that we don't have to always be face-to-face enabled in order to really change coaching culture and coach development?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. Right. There's a plethora of ways to access information now, and whether it's YouTube or social media or whatever, getting that content out there is easier than ever. The challenge is having the time and resources to continually push out new content and make sure that you're not getting lost, I'll say, in the noise of everything else that's out there. So what we've really been doing is starting to focus more on the targeted webinars. We don't do a lot of direct to coach instruction via online currently. We are working on building a learning management system that will house multiple courses for coaches, officials, athletes, and so we're going to be leveraging that. Hoping to launch that somewhere in September. It's up now and there's some content in there, but when you put out a new product, you don't want to launch a learning management system with one course and everybody go, you want to have some a robust number of offerings so that it's interesting the first time someone goes to it. So we're going to launch that in September. And one of the things we're doing with that to overcome some of the challenges that we just talked about is really starting to, I'll say, partner with some of our national governing bodies. I'll use Hong Kong as an example. They have a pretty dedicated sport development staff and a couple of full-time staff members, and they've done some instructional videos in 2 or 3 different languages. So we're incorporating their videos into our learning management system, so that when somebody goes to the bronze online course, if you will, they can get in there and okay, I can take it in Mandarin, I can take it in English. We just approved some grants to some European countries who are going to do some videos in 5, common European languages for us. So we're going to put all of those resources in there, and we're working with them. So it's the World Lacrosse curriculum, but as delivered in French or German or Mandarin or whatever the language might be.
Right. Very interesting stuff. And I love to see the progress being made, both nationally, but also internationally to develop coaches and improve just the quality of coaching that occurs. I'm sure there's a lot more that you can tell us, but I want to be mindful of your time. So if somebody does have a question for you and wants to get in touch or learn more, I know the athlete development model is something that you're coming out with soon. And how then do they get in touch with you?
Sure. No, so you can, best way to get a hold of me is via email. And I think Tim was going to pop it up on the screen here, but for those who are maybe listening on a podcast or something like that, my email address is tbuchanan@worldlacrosse.sport, and I'll spell that out. So it is TBUCHANAN at WORLDLACROSSE. Sometimes that gets missed on the end there. .sport, SPORT.
No typos in spelling that. Well done. That's a long
It's
email.
a lengthy email address.
Yeah. Well, TJ, thank you so much for joining us and talking a little bit about your career and what you do and the importance of it as well. And of course, I do hope that people do reach out if they have questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Tim. As I said, it's been a pleasure. And, I've worked specifically in lacrosse, but I've also done some work with the USOPC, as you know, from, Chris introducing us and, a couple of other sports as well. So if there's any questions or anything I can help with, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help.
Thank you. And just by the way, don't forget, if you haven't yet, to follow, like, subscribe to the channels. Of course, all of these are being put on our YouTube channel. We also have a podcast available of these. So if you're interested in, listening to these while you're on a run or something, be sure to get on the podcast as well. But on behalf of myself, Tim Bankhurst, and TJ Buchanan, thank you so much for watching.